Well, I've ignored like 80% of the work here, but as you can see, my turbo Buick setup is in the car and my carb turbo Buick is out of the car. So, reminder, this is a 4.1, so like 81 to 83-ish, still Buick V6, but I originally put this together for my wagon, G-body wagon. I bought all these parts off of a widow of a guy that had like half a dozen Grand Nationals and T-types and such. He ended up passing away. His wife and son kept like one car, but they had just totes along the side of the garage with like tons of parts. So basically I pieced together all of the valve covers, the exhaust manifolds, the accessories, the wiring harness, the ECM, etc., etc., etc. I originally was going to slam it on that engine. The bottom end is actually pretty good. It's got a nice ported set of heads. It's just hyper pistons, but it's still got the turbo rods because it was a factory turbo engine. And then I ended up buying my wagon. Decided it was better to put the stuff on the 3.8 in that engine, in that car, but the 3.8 huffed like a quart of oil every 200 miles. I decided that was not good. Found this pair of 4.1s that was rebuilt back in the early 90s. The 141, they were both 30 over. One was a full engine oil pan to carburetor, which is mostly what's here. The only problem is the guy spun a rod bearing back in like 91, brought the crank to the reman shop. They welded up the journal, and then he put the engine together, drove it for about 50 miles, 200 miles, something like that, and then it cracked the crank. So I might throw a picture what the crank looked like, but it ended up knocking the skirts off pistons 1 and 2 because it broke right between the number 2 crank journal and the number 2 main. Basically, I just took, he had 2 engines I bought for like $150 or something like that. The 141 was complete sealed. The other one I just pulled out 2 pistons from and the crank, dropped it in here. They were both like 10-10 crank turn and 30 over, so I just stuck stuff one engine to another. They were both aftermarket 30 over pistons, so everything was fine. Got really lucky there. Slammed this together in my wagon, but there's been a lot of small issues that I never fixed or never did in the beginning. Basically what I discovered is all of these turbo Buicks sitting around, unless they've been maintained really well, don't run worth a crap because the coils suck, the ignition modules suck, the coil or the cam sensor caps suck, and the mass airflow sensors suck. So basically anything that's EFI related is just, it was an early take, it's not robust, and it didn't last. So a couple things that I did were to do the coil conversion. So this is by a company called Dynamic EFI, and this is an LS coil conversion driver module. There's a board in here that goes onto the coil module or the ignition module, and then this aluminum cover. You build a little harness, and you can put LS coils. So I did a little bit of cutting down on some OEM LS coils, and then just took some bolts and some nut standoffs, drilled and tapped the head of the bolt to put the nut standoff there, and then welded a little tab on those. So I got very similar to an LS. I put a Casper's cap in there for the cam sensor. I did a mass airflow, like a MAF translator, with a Blazer 4.3 from like 01, 97 or whatever. Everyone's like, oh, run the LT1 MAF, but the 4.3 Blazer MAF is the same as a brand new LT1 MAF, and they built 20 million Blazers and 4.3s and like 7 LT1 cars at my local junkyard. So I got like a almost brand new MAF, or looked really nice off a low mile car that was just wrecked, Blazer, and put that on there. What I'm doing actually right now is doing a intake air temp relocation. So that's my air intake temp. GM usually put those in the MAF tube going between the turbo and the air filter, but it doesn't really see the hot air temp after the intercooler, so did that relocation. It's basically just wrapping up. I got the engine in. Most of the wiring is done. Actually, the wiring was pretty easy on this. This is a G-body, and the engine came out of a G-body, obviously. So this little harness down there, that goes through the stock access port that goes into the car for the ECM. Had to do a little bit of rewiring over on the passenger side. I'm not running, obviously, a Power Master like that E-pump booster that the factory Grand Nationals had. I'm just going to run a stock vacuum booster because it's fine. All the relays and stuff are pretty much fine. The only thing I needed to splice in was extra power for the coil. Basically, I got this little, the pink wire came off of the fuse box, and that's ignition power, which goes to this block, and this is just a key-on ignition power block for spark for coils. And I got my fuel pump turn-on wire in here too. And then a couple other, like, just activate the ECM wires. So pretty basic there. I honestly only like 6 or 7 wires to splice. If you have an 83 or 84 up car, your fuse block just plugs right in. Obviously the engine just bolts right in. A couple things I did do was I splurged and bought one of the nice HR parts poly driver side motor mounts, and I just bought a brand new like $8 OEM mount for the passenger side because that's got a lot more sauce than that engine, and these have a history of busting the driver's mounts. So basically just got to wrap up bolting up the transmission to the engine. I got like 2 of the bolts in, but I got to put the rest of them in. Put the torque converter bolts in. I got to drop the turbo in. Once the turbo's in, I can put the fender back on. Really, the only reason I took the fender off was I had to access that port down there to put the harness in. This little bracket bolts on, and you can't take the bolt off that hold the bracket on with the fender on, so you gotta pull the fender and the inner fender to put this harness in. I guess jumping on a little bit, the only other wiring issues here, I've got a relay for my fuel pump. That is I got like a power wire coming from the battery that goes here. That's the power battery 2 here. That's the power the power wire from the relay to the trunk mounted location for the fuel pump. And then this, if I remember right, was the ignition relay, but I spliced the power from that harness. So I got this wire here that I gotta reconnect. Anyways, pretty much just goes in, not that hard. Just a lot of little stuff here and there. Maybe I'll have it running on Wednesday, so it's Saturday day. So catch you later.